Okay, picture this. A vast, infinitely complex spiritual operating system. We're talking about a blindingly brilliant architecture of pure consciousness, just humming in the metaphysical void. This is Adam Kadmon.
And today, welcome to an exhaustive deep dive into how universes are actually born within that very system. Relying strictly on the profound texts of the Talmud Eser Sefirot, Part 3, we are going to trace the cinematic genesis of the 5 Partzufim. We're going to literally witness how a spiritual screen rises, purifies, returns to its root, and then descends again to generate entirely new luminous architectures.
Right, but before we even boot up this explainer, I need to issue a massive, absolutely crucial warning. Do not, under any circumstances, imagine physical bodies, physical rising, or literal spatial movement here. We have to leave our physical brains at the door.
Exactly. No biology, no geometry. In Kabbalah, specifically in these source texts, we are dealing entirely with pure spiritual cause and effect. A change of form simply equals spiritual distance. So keep your mind locked entirely on data flows, energy, and pure intent.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the spiritual OS, define the firewall, break down the mechanics of the reboot, explore the first generations of Galgalta and Ab, then SAG, Ma, and Baal, before we wrap up with our final download. Section 1. The Spiritual Operating System. Pure Cause and Effect. Section 2. Prashat. Defining the firewall. Let's get our foundational vocabulary straight. To really grasp the mechanics of the system, we have to lay out the Lurianic vocabulary. Think of this as learning the base coding language of the cosmos. Without these definitions, understanding how a universe is born is going to be virtually impossible.
Let's start with the Masach. When the infinite light, the Or Yashar, wants to pour into the vessel, it's the Masach that stops it. It is literally the ultimate spiritual firewall protecting a cosmic server. It sets up a strict boundary so that the infinite light doesn't just completely overwhelm the receiving system.
For sure. And, if you prefer a video game analogy, it works perfectly here too. Think of the Masach like a massive energy shield absorbing a colossal hit from a boss level. It takes the absolute full brunt of the infinite light to protect the player or the vessel behind it. But here's the thing. Not all firewalls are created equal. And that brings us to Aviut. Now, Aviut translates to coarseness or thickness, but in our modern tech language, I want you to think of it strictly as bandwidth.
Bandwidth is exactly the right word for it. It dictates precisely how much light the Masach crew process at any given moment. This bandwidth ranges from level 4, which is the absolute maximum capacity, down through 3, 2, 1, and finally hits level 0, which we call shorish, or the root.
Right. The thicker the Aviut, the higher the bandwidth, which means the system can handle and reveal a whole lot more of that infinite light. Next up is Hizdakchut, which means purification.
Right, so we have to ask, what happens when the light is held back and eventually departs?
The Masach undergoes Hizdakchut. It loses its Aviut, its coarseness. Going back to our analogies, it's exactly like your video game energy shield completely losing its power and desperately needing to return to home base to recharge.
Or in cosmic engineering terms, it's a firewall shedding its heavy data load so it can return to its original root code.
Which naturally leads us to a really fascinating question. What exactly happens when that light finally stops?
Well, that's the suspenseful part. When the light departs, which is a process called Histalkut, the universe doesn't just shut down. It's absolutely not game over. Instead, this departure triggers the core engine of creation. It initiates the exact, intricate sequence that will literally birth the next dimension.
Section 3. Mechanics of the reboot. The birth of a dimension. Okay, let's really slow down here because this is the exhaustively detailed cosmic protocol, the exact mechanics of the reboot. Step 1 is Bitush. Right, Bitush is the beating, the collision. You have the surrounding light and the inner light constantly crashing against the Masach. The pressure is immense. And this collision, this incredible pressure, is exactly what forces step 2, Hizdakchut. The screen simply can't hold that kind of tension forever, so it purifies. It drops its bandwidth and ascends straight back up to its root, to the rosh, the head. And once it gets back to the root, it undergoes step 3, Zivug. This is a renewed coupling at the root level where it rethickens, but critically with a new, lower level of bandwidth, which then triggers step 4, Histalkut, the new descent. It essentially downloads an entirely new light stack into existence. Collision, purification, root coupling, and a new descent. That right there is the cosmic reboot cycle. And all of that builds into the profound concept of Zivug de Hakaa. This translates as the striking coupling. The direct light, or yashar, hits the Masach. But because the Masach refuses to take the light selfishly for itself, it actually strikes it and bounces it right back.
This bouncing back is called Hozer, the returning light. And here is the secret, and honestly, it's mind-blowing. That returning light actually becomes the Kli. It becomes the containing vessel for the new universe.
Really let that sink in for a second. The resistance itself creates the capacity to hold the light. The act of pushing back the infinite is what builds the very structure capable of receiving it. It is awe-inspiring philosophy embedded right there in pure mechanics. Now, to map this out, the texts use specific structural nodes: Rosh, Guf, Peh, and Tabor. And again, applying our tech vocabulary here and remembering absolutely no physical bodies, Rosh is the head, but I want you to think of it as the root code, or the CPU. Guf is the body representing the main data structure where the light actually expands and operates. Peh is the mouth, which is the output gate, where that Zivug, that striking coupling we just talked about, actually happens. And Tabor is the navel, the absolute end of processing where the light can no longer descend. I just love how elegantly this plays out across our different analogies. If we look at it through cosmic engineering, each new Partzuf is an entirely new receiver architecture. It's produced when the firewall purifies, uploads its root data, reconfigures its bandwidth, and outputs a brand new light stack. And for a visually simpler video game version, each Partzuf is basically a completely new level generated right after your shield loses power. It returns to base, gets a system upgrade, or in this case, actually a protocol downgrade, and launches an entirely new world stage. It's wild how both analogies describe the exact same profound spiritual truth. Section 4, Galgalta and Ikanabi, the first generations. So it all begins with the overarching OS, Adam Kadmon. And the very first Partzuf to emerge from it is Galgalta. Galgalta is born with the absolute maximum bandwidth, level 4 Aviut. It handles the most intense, blazing light. But eventually, the light beats against its screen. Galgalta's Masach undergoes Hizdakchut. It purifies, sheds that immense weight, and ascends all the way back to the Peh, the output gate of its root. We need to really digest this transition. Up at the root, it receives a new, slightly lower bandwidth. It drops from a level 4 down to a level 3. And with that level 3 bandwidth, it descends to birth the next Partzuf, which is Ab. But that raises a big question. How does the system actually know what to build next? How does it know to build AB? Through Reshimot. As the Masach purifies and the light departs, it doesn't just leave an empty void. It leaves behind Reshimot. Think of it exactly like spiritual cache data, or root memory. When you clear your browser, some essential root data always stays behind. This cache data dictates the comet or, the exact height of the light for the very next generation. It contains precise records of both Hizdakchut, the light that was previously clothed there, and Aviut, the thickness that still remains. So when the Partzuf of Ab is generated from this cache data, it operates at a highly specific frequency. The texts tell us AB corresponds to the gematria of 72. Wait, what does the gematria 72 actually mean in the context of this cosmic system?
It's a great question. It's the spelling out of the divine name Havaya using the letter Yod. It's a specific frequency that perfectly represents the Sephirot of Kokma, divine wisdom. It's literally the signature code for that specific bandwidth.
Section 5, SAG, Ma, and Bon, the cascading downgrade. We continue the descent. The universe is essentially cooling down, compressing, and this table maps out the entire cascading downgrade beautifully.
Let's follow the momentum here. Galgalta is level 4 Aviut, corresponding to Keter. Its Masach purifies, drops down to level 3, and births AB, which is Chakma, at value 72.
Taking the baton, AB's Masach then purifies, drops down to level 2 Aviut, and births SAG, corresponding to Bina, value 63.
SAG then purifies, dropping to level 1, birthing MA, which is Zir Ampin, value 45.
And finally, MA purifies down to level 0, the Shorish, birthing Bon, which is Malkut, value 52. Every single one is a direct, cascading consequence of the purification and rethickening of the one right above it. It's incredibly systematic. Now, a really quick point of clarification just as a conversational aside here. Broader mystical traditions often discuss specific red and white color shifts corresponding to these exact transitions, representing judgments and mercies.
Right, they do. But we are sticking strictly to the uploaded Talmud Eser Sefirot text for this explainer. And in this specific source text, those color shifts are not explicitly detailed. And our rule is simple, we only teach what is explicitly in the source text.
Now, you might be wondering why each new Partzuf is lower or has a smaller capacity than the last. Well, this is entirely because of the kamat or, the height of the light. Let's lean back into our tech analogy for a second. Every single time the system reboots, the Masach drops its Aviut bandwidth by 1 degree. Because the returning light, the Hozer, depends entirely on the absolute strength of the resistance, a lower bandwidth naturally means a shorter returning light. Exactly. Less resistance means lower resolution. The height of revelation spiritually shrinks with each and every downgrade. And let me tell you, this process gets incredibly complex at the level of SAG. When SAG purifies from level 2 to level 1, something totally unique happens. Its light had actually expanded below the tabor, the navel of the entire system. That expansion below the navel is a real game changer. Because it went so far down, when it finally purifies, it leaves behind highly volatile, mixed Reshimot. It leaves behind data records of both Tamim and Nekudat, intricately intertwined. And this specific complex volatility is exactly what generates Ema and Bon, and ultimately fragments to create the intricate architecture known as the world of Nekudim. I want to read a quote that just captures this perfectly. Every Partzuf new and born is a direct consequence of the higher one purifying itself and returning to its root.
Wow. It's truly profound when you stop to really think about it. Spiritual birth, the literal creation of a completely new dimension, absolutely requires the previous level to completely surrender its light. It literally has to shed its ego, its coarseness, and return to its source to be renewed before it can ever give life to the next phase.
Section 6. The final download. We've traversed the heights of the spiritual operating system today, from the ultimate firewall all the way down through the cascading generations of Galgalta to Bon.
Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week.
If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.